Hi everyone, I'm Matt Goodison. Welcome to Play in the System, the podcast, episode 2. Whoosh. Thank you so much for tuning in to episode 1. Some really thoughtful discussion and feedback from Richie Vernon, aka Richie Infidels, James Humphreys, aka Jimbo Humphreys, David Gauntlet, Professor of Creativity at Ryerson in Canada. Thank you so much for David Shepherd to appearing on the show. We talked about some really interesting stuff. Ambient music as protest. We talked obviously a lot about creativity and a whole heap of things. So yeah, if you want to go back and check that one out, please do. I'm Matt Goodison. You can find me on pretty much all social media platforms, apart from TikTok. Should I be on TikTok? I can't work it out. But I'm at Matt Goodison on Instagram. I'm at Matt Goodison on Twitter. They're the two I probably use the most. So if you want to hook up with me, please do. Thanks to Spando Wiro, Graham, who wrote to me a lot about all things infidels. So yeah, I posted him a Infidels original Dead 001 made back in 2003 by our very own hands. And yeah, that blew his mind. So that was really awesome. Thanks for being a fan. Thanks for supporting the band. Genuinely mean it. Also, the Wavescapes maxi single EP, mini album, whatever you call it, is here on physical copies. So there's only, I'm looking at them now, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11. There's only 12 more of these wonderful cassette tapes left. And this is a collaboration between myself and the artist Catherine Greenwood. Comes on a lovely Catherine Greenwood Chosen Blue. And yeah, that's a pretty ambient record, ambient cassette. And here it is on CD. So yeah, there's probably, I don't know exactly how many, probably about 23 of these left. Thought I'd make a really limited run, and they've been selling really, really well on Bandcamp. So yeah, if you're up for that, head over to Bandcamp. Bandcamp are the best company to buy stuff from because they waiver a lot of their fee in favour of supporting us, the artists. So yeah, the episode coming up with Isobel Anderson, we talk about this. We talk about how to be an artist. We discuss Daniel E. Kay's recent statements regarding being a musician, which are, if an artist wants to do well in streaming, he or she must adapt to the changing music landscape and increase engagement with consumers. This means that they must maintain a steady stream of releases, which wasn't as necessary in the past. So, yes, Isobel Anderson and myself talk about that quote and what that means to be a musician in the changing 21st century. We also discuss a lot about mental health, well-being and workaholism, as well as how to set up your company, build community, and obviously a little bit of coronavirus in there, and harmony, love, and connectivity. So thanks for listening. It's great to be with you for episode 2. Thanks for all the support. I'm on a mission to facilitate creativity in the world. I feel like I took on that baton from the late, I'm really sad about this, Sir Ken Robinson, who passed away this week. So this episode is dedicated to you, Sir Ken Robinson, my hero, who famously argued for the need to foster creativity in his famous talk that you should definitely check out, Do Schools Kill Creativity? I'll lead you to answer that question. See you soon. Thank you very much. Hi, we are here, Playing the System with Dr. Isobel Anderson. Thank you so much for coming. We've just been having the kind of off-camera preamble chat to kind of work out what we are going to discuss on the podcast. And what I think is quite interesting is we've started almost where maybe normally may end up, which is talking about mental health, self-worth, and workaholism. So we were both saying, I was saying that, this morning I was kind of tapping my head, hey, are you in there? Are you okay? I don't know. And you've been having similar thoughts in this kind of crazy post-COVID, pre-COVID 2 time. So you were talking about workaholism and your mental health. How do you know if you're okay, and what do you do if you aren't okay?
We're really starting off with the difficult stuff, aren't we, Matt?
Yeah. We're
How do you know if you're okay?
Jump straight in, but I think this COVID is a crazy beast, and I think we're in a new phase, aren't we? We're out of. COVID's different for everyone, and there's lots of narratives. So I always like to put a disclaimer that my and maybe your perception of what's been going on is very different to people who have experienced sickness or, death or any of the kind of very frontline things. I haven't experienced that much of that. So I've had a kind of utopian lockdown, which has been about the sun and the birds and the maybe what Bertrand Russell was saying, in praise of idleness, even though I wasn't idle, but a calming down. And that was very utopian. Now we're in a new phase that's I'm finding much harder. Maybe it's, I read someone sent me an article on burnout. Like you've gone through this kind of energy rush of like all this stuff. And now those people are starting to burn out. I'm definitely in that camp. So we're in a kind of new phase of the COVID era. And it's exhausting.
It is exhausting. So I think for me, the things that I've found really great about it have been, like you say, I've spent a lot more time in nature than I probably would have done. And that's even just in my, my back garden, I've really spent a lot of time cultivating that, which has felt really nourishing. And I'm such a typical middle-class white cis woman in her 30s. I really am. I'm pickling cabbage and growing things in the garden. So I'm totally subscribing to that stereotype. But I've found that really nourishing, and I've also found not having to be anywhere really good for me, because I'm somebody that if I'm traveling around a lot and if I'm around a lot of people, it really drains me. I am an introvert. I love socializing. I'm good at socializing. But I don't, it drains me, it really does. And I need that time at home. So I've found having that time at home really good. And I haven't minded at all that means that I'm just with my boyfriend, all the time. When we were in proper lockdown, not now, obviously. There's that. But then the things that I found tough, and I think that a lot of people listening to this podcast who maybe do creative things and are doing things being paid by the hour or projects here and there. What's tough is that then obviously work gets slashed, and then you're sort of hustling around trying to make things work. But I think I was doing that anyway. That was kind of my life anyway. It's just, it's kind of got even more so because more work is more precarious now, I guess. And just to clarify, if anyone's wondering, like most of my income comes from teaching now. So I teach across music production, songwriting, creative process, and personal and professional development. And I teach mainly at ICMP, but also a little bit at BIM as well in London. So that's my kind of bread and butter, but I'm also starting up a business, which is called the Female DIY Musician, and I'm launching the signature course, which is called Home Recording Academy in September. So that's been so busy, but also with so much uncertainty about how much I'll earn next month and the month after that and 6 months. And so there's just a lot of pressure there. And what I found was especially especially August, it's really started coming to a head for me, where I've really started kind of feeling really frayed at every single edge of my being. And I definitely got to that point. It was last week where I was up in London doing assessments. And it was very intense because I hadn't been up there for a long time. Usually I would spend half the week in London teaching, and then I go back to my house in Hastings at the weekend. And I hadn't done that for months. And so I was back up there, and it was kind of a taste of what my lifestyle had been like before. And I just felt so incredibly tired and exhausted and stressed. And I had so much to do. And I just decided I've got to take time off. So I took Monday and Tuesday off this week. But the thing that I found most shocking for me was that felt so incredible to take that time off, because since Christmas, I've only taken a week off. That's it. And again, I know there's probably lots of people listening to this podcast thinking, well, yeah, like me too. But that's not okay. That's just not okay. And I've been reading a book about workaholism, like we were talking about before we started recording. And the more I read it, the more I'm like, God, I've got this. I've definitely got this, and I've got to get a handle on it, because the biggest reason is obviously health-wise, but the second biggest reason is I want to actually enjoy my life. I don't want to feel embittered, and I don't want to feel resentful, and I don't want to feel exhausted, and I don't want to be looking out at the future feeling pessimistic. And that's what happens when you kind of get into that workaholic tendency. And so you were asking, how do you know if you're not okay? Well, for me, I know I'm not okay if when I'm looking at my future, it feels scary and boring or overwhelming or disappointing. That's when I know I'm not okay. And when I'm not enjoying, and I don't mean like, over the moon every minute of the day, but when I'm not feeling fulfillment from at least, most of my life, I don't think that's too much to ask, actually, fulfillment. I'm not talking, like I say, I'm not talking about crazy excitement here, but just a sense of, I'm taking care of myself. I'm meeting my basic needs, and I'm also able to actually kind of respect and appreciate and love myself as a human. And that's when I know I'm not on the right track. And I was really feeling the total opposite last week. So I very last minute took that time off. I mean, Tuesday was my birthday. And I just was starting to see these tendencies of like, no, I'll work through my birthday. It's a Tuesday. It's a work day, and just, really, really toxic.
So much to unpack there. But firstly, I'm fascinated. What is workaholism?
So workaholism, let me just hang on. I've got the book right by me.
Yeah, let's see the book.
So workaholism, that's the book.
Oh, look at that. Chained to the desk. Oh my goodness me.
I know.
Imagine if you actually were chained to your desk. But we are, aren't we? We're mentally chained. Yeah. We
chain ourselves to our desks a lot of the time. And I think people say, oh, no, it's because my boss is an absolute tyrant, or I don't have enough money, or all those things. And those things are kind of true. But if we really are honest, probably a lot of it is a compulsion as well, and a lack of knowing what else to do. A lack of not having any other strategies to solve those problems. So you just work more. So this book is written by Brian E. Robinson. He was one of the first people to research workaholism. And it's a really good book, actually, if you're worried about maybe having this. It's a great book because it actually talks...
So I take it that's Brian E. rather than Brian E. Robinson.
No, Brian E. Brian E. Robinson.
We have my cat's called Eno, and we always have a joke, me and David Shepherd, who I'm in Snow Palms with, who wrote the Brian Eno biography. We often joke that the cat's called Brian Eno, which is probably sad and probably a dad joke. I don't know, but I love it, like this idea. Or it could be like maybe if I've got a lot of friends who... run a great club and community called Sing the Pink, and I often wonder, like, maybe my drag name would be Bryony No, to go alongside like Leona Lewisham.
Oh, that's good. Yeah, that's great. That's a really good one, Matt.
Yeah, I think it's really good. Yeah,
that's a good one. That's a good one. Yeah, I like that one.
Right, next time you see me, Isobel, I won't be Matt Goodison anymore. No. I'll be Bryony No.
I love that. Yeah, totally. But you'll have to obviously make a very extravagant drag outfit that has lots of knobs and levers and
oh yeah, but to break my, you were talking about you being a cultural stereotype. I mean, my cultural stereotype is massive, bald, glasses. Like, even I saw like a video on what is it with modular guys and wedding rings. Like,
oh my god, that's hilarious.
I know, but
that's hilarious. I've never seen that.
Yeah, you watch a modular video and the hand will be there twiddling the knobs with the wedding ring on. It's
that's
such a
so
thing.
Good. That's so good.
So I'm such a stereotype and I hate it, but equally, these are the things I love for a whole heap of reasons.
I know.
Tape machines,
I know.
buttons and dials. But maybe, I'm going off on a tangent, but like I was that guy in the choir at 6 years old that was delighted. I had such a passion and love of music for a whole heap of reasons. And I was that guy where I stop the choir. Who's singing out of tune? Sing. It's you.
Oh God, that sounds awful.
Never sang again till I was in my punk band. So I do think there's some kind of relationship between boys, men, voice, knobs, dials, buttons. But it just scared the living daylights out of me,
Sure it did.
So I kind of retreated into things that weren't emanating from my personage.
Yes. Yeah, that's interesting, isn't it?
Yeah.
That's really interesting. Yeah, so someone's like, what's coming out of your mouth is not good.
Yeah,
so you're like,
doing
okay.
That. Okay,
Okay,
right.
well, I'll focus on something that's not me.
Yeah, tapes, it's an impersonal thing. And I wonder how many other people have that story.
Yeah,
I don't
that's
know.
very interesting.
So workaholism. So what's the difference then between working hard and working holic?
So, really, it's like, it's kind of like, what's the difference between someone who enjoys drinking socially and someone who's an alcoholic?
So I still haven't figured that out about myself.
Okay.
When I open the fridge and I see the beer and I'm thinking, 6 o'clock, you'll be mine. Is that enjoying the drink or is that holism?
I know. Well, we all, because I have a similar thing. I mean, I really try and not drink in the week, but when it gets to Friday, I'm like gin and tonic. Gin and tonic. Again, totally subscribing to my stereotype here. What 30s middle class woman doesn't love a gin and tonic?
Well, mine is like obviously a punk IPA. It has to be post-acne hipster.
Some hipster beer,
But I do like the taste of it. And I had this question a lot when I was touring, and we both have similar experiences of being a professional musician. So when I was touring, drinking was such a massive part of that culture. And this sounds insane now, but we drank like Jägermeister for breakfast.
Oh, Jesus.
Partly because it was kind of funny. But, I did question, okay, so do you need a drink to do your job? Well, being in a band, hell yeah. I needed a drink to do the job. And when I quit drinking for 6 weeks, I sucked. I couldn't be like Matty Infidel, the hat-wearing rock and roller, unless I was kind of A, really sozzled, or B, partly sozzled, because I don't know, it was part of what I felt like I needed to do that job. So does that technically maybe made me an alcoholic, And I drank every day, loads of it. Yeah,
I'd say that lots of us go through those sort of phases in our lives where it plays a bigger part. But I think obviously then there's some people where it tips over into be really like obviously visibly destructive. But that doesn't mean that just because you're not visibly destructive to yourself or other people that it's not an addiction, I guess. Yeah.
It totally freaked me out. And then obviously after 12 years of it, I felt very unwell. Yeah. And very, very unwell, mentally, spiritually, physically, exhausted and very unwell. And that's when I discovered the Ken Robinson video. I found out he died the other day, which I was devastated by. Yeah. Leading thinker on creativity in education, and essentially why is creativity in education ignored when other things are so promoted? And saw his video and felt galvanised to kind of pick up whatever you'd call it, the wand of change, and do an MA in education and try and further, which is, has led to things like this, podcast about creativity and change. But obviously spills out into many other things. Yeah. So workaholism then is when you feel maybe that you don't have self-worth doing other things. Is that what it is? I think it's really complicated. I think that for some people it's that they maybe as a child found a lot of retreat and solace in work and in achieving. Yeah. And it was the only way that they could either get peace. Like maybe you grew up in a family where you had an alcoholic father or mother or something like that. And retreating into schoolwork or other kind of work meant that you had some self-worth and some achievement and some order. So that can be where it starts sometimes. But it can be lots of other reasons why it starts. And then what it is I think the difference between just working hard and being a workaholic is that it spills over into really compromising really fundamental parts of your life, like your family life, your health, your mental health, your spiritual life, your community life, and it becomes all encompassing, and it becomes the focus of not just your Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, but the evenings, the weekends. Even if you're not working, you're thinking about work. So you're sitting at the table with your family and you're thinking about work, and you feel almost kind of not you or scared or panicky, or I think a lot of men would not acknowledge that it's fear, but maybe you feel frustrated or angry or uncomfortable if you're not working as well. So for me, like when I realized I saw it as 4 days off. It's not, it's 2 days off. It's Monday, Tuesday. But in my head, it's 4 days off because I would work Saturday, Sunday a lot of the time as well, even just in bits. So for me to take a full 4 days off was a big deal. And I was kind of like, oh, I'm a bit scared about that because how is all the stuff going to get done? And what will I do with 4 full days? And I was like, Jesus, Isobel, that's awful. Like, that's really awful. And what I find is when I do take time off, then I'm like, I don't want to go back because it's so black and white. It's so extreme. I'm either working really hard or then occasionally I'll take time off and then I just kind of totally tune out. And then I don't want to, I could tune out for the next however many months. So I think in answer to your question, it's really hard to define it for just in general, but like any addiction, it's where you lose that sense of boundaries, you lose that sense of perspective, you start becoming very black and white thinking about it. Like if I don't do, these many hours a day, et cetera, then I'm not going to have enough money and I'll have, everything's going to be awful, or everyone's going to think that I'm not committed. And a lot of time it's bound up in self-worth around work, that your identity, your self-worth is bound up in your profession, your achievements, your career, rather than who you are. And I very much am somebody that's like that, and that I've spent the last kind of 10 years of my life trying to unpick that. And I'm not there yet. I just have a lot more awareness about it. So when I was feeling... So I'm able to read this workaholic book and be like, oh yeah, I know this already. It's just, oh shit, it's actually written in a book. Crap. Yeah. Like I knew it before because I've done all this work on myself because I've burnt out so many times and I've suffered the consequences. But reading it in a book where someone's actually packaged it up and I'm like, oh God. And, there were bits that were like, yes, I really relate to that in my childhood, or yes, I really relate to that in my parents, or yeah, I really relate to that in terms of how I feel about myself professionally. And I think that for me growing up, I had dyslexia. And so I was always told that I was just never doing well enough, ever. But the only thing that I naturally really excelled at beyond anyone else in this whole school was singing. So the minute I got up on stage and I opened my mouth, it was the most natural thing ever. And it would just come out and I'd be like, great, okay, cool. I didn't have to work at it at all. And I still have that. Like I haven't been playing for so long because of chronic pain, which is like a fallout of the burnout. But I picked up my guitar a few times recently and did some lives on my music page. And when I watch them back, I'm like, God, it's so natural. This is so easy. Oh my God. Because everything else I do in my life just doesn't feel that easy at all. And I think a lot of musicians find that. But for me, having dyslexia especially, I really found a lot of
kind of sanctuary in music of, oh, finally, I can just be me and I can just turn up and it's good enough. That feels really nice. But then now, obviously, life isn't just singing unless you're Adele or someone like that. Life is lots of different things. And obviously, I have lots of other skills as well. But I think it instilled in me the sense that I have to work my fucking arse off to get, and I'm fine with working hard. I mean, the good thing about it is it instilled in me a really good work ethic, where I think other people, they leave school and they're like, oh, what? Things aren't just going to fall on my lap? What's this? Yeah. Whereas I left school and I was like, yeah, okay, bring it on, let's do it. I've been here before. I've had to work my arse off just to get my maths GCSE, you know, whatever. And so for me, it's been good, but it's spilt over a lot of the time. I think partly because of doing music, because there is no end. Nobody's paying you much, you know, at the beginning especially. I had to work so hard for so many years to get any kind of proper income from my music, which was Spotify. So I've never been in a situation where I've been signed to a label and they'd be like, here's a retainer, or any other kind of situation where I just get paid for my music, apart from the really fucking hard graft that I've put in and then built up as a DIY artist.
I think that's what's so unique about you, and certainly something we connected over, is that, you know, you have worked so hard on all these things. Like, you've got a PhD, you're a great teacher, you're starting a company, which I remember when I first got invited to co-mark some work with you on a creativity module, which I was delighted to accept. I remember Googling you, and the normal pattern is PhD, starting company, and you expect to see, oh, they've got some music on Spotify, you know, the little funny triangle under 1,000, and you're like, your plays are just insane. I was like, oh my God, you know, there's like 40 million plays of your work, which is just so awesome. And I remember being totally pumped to meet you. But you have, you know, you really built that yourself. So, you know, I feel, you know, a real relationship to that story, because my band, Infidels, we followed a similar model. We really grew it from the ground up. We started our own record label. We pressed our own vinyl. We built it step by step. We did jump ship and sign to Sony ATV and Wall of Sound and these whole companies. But I'm expecting my journey was predated yours by a couple of years, because this was sort of 2003.
Yes.
And
a good
that was the last
10 years exactly.
That was the last like rope down from the helicopter.
Yeah, absolutely.
Kind of, that was the last opportunity for that before the industry radically changed. So I'm a real advocate of that model of taking off from the ground, running, doing your own thing. What advice would you give to all those young people out there who are kind of beginning that journey?
I'd say start before you're ready. It's so simple, but start before you're ready. Clarity comes after action. So many people think, oh, I have to have everything in place and I have to have this budget and I have to have, you know, this all set up. No, just release something. And also, and release it imperfectly. Just resign yourself to releasing imperfectly. It's fine. My first release is so riddled with flaws, but actually a lot of those flaws I love and I wouldn't change it. And people have sometimes asked, would you go back and redo that? And I'm like, no. I wouldn't, because I love going back. I mean, I don't do this all the time, but the rare occasions.
Sit there every day and go, I'm just going to vibe myself up. Isobel Anderson, album 1, let's go.
I'm just going to spend the whole day going through my back catalogue. No, I don't do that. But what I do occasionally is, because somebody will share something online and it'll remind me of like, oh yeah, that song, God, that's like from my first album. Yeah. And if I play anything from that first album, I just think, God, it's so cool. Like, I love the fact that it's quite quirky in very subtle ways. I was in my MA doing my MA in Sonic Arts. I was experimenting with some really subtle ideas about spatialization and all that kind of stuff. So it's not perfect. It's not what you would release on a major record label, but I kind of love that. So I think if anyone's sitting here thinking, like listening, and even if it's not an album, even if it's a book, if it's a course, if it's a dance piece, whatever you're working on, start before you're ready. Because the point is that the actual process of releasing something, putting it out into the world, that is still part of the creative process, and you need to learn that. And you only learn that by doing. You don't learn it by hearing somebody talk you through it, because it's going to be different for everybody. So that's number one, start before you're ready. Number two is don't release your favourite song first. Because everyone's like, oh, I want to release something, but there's this song that is my best song and I haven't recorded it yet, and so I'm not going to release anything until that's ready. And I always say to people, don't try. Well, also people say my songs aren't good enough yet. So this goes for any other creative output. Like I said before, don't release your best work yet. Like first. Don't, because you're going to learn so much about releasing. So if your best song right now, it won't be your best song forever, or if your best book right now, or whatever it is, release that second or third, because then you'll know so much more about releasing. So those are my 2 bits of advice, and it often cuts through a lot of the bullshit that people are telling themselves about why they can't release right now. You can. And the point is not to release so that you immediately kind of have this overnight success and everyone loves you and everyone thinks you're the most amazing thing on the planet. It's to actually move the needle further towards you becoming a professional creative. Because the first time you launch something, it's not going to do that unless some crazy shit happens in the universe. But other than that, it's not going to do that. What it's going to do is teach you so many useful lessons so that next time you launch even better. You know, does that make sense?
I think that's great. And I totally get it. I think I've always been afforded a really positive attitude to music. And sharing music and releasing music. And I think that's come from my mum and dad and my sister, where music was a really liberating, free space in my house. My dad is an enormous music lover. He had the biggest record collection, which pre-Spotify was just a gift, like, Mississippi field recordings from the 1930s through to, rare jazz records. And my mum, was a lover of all things with a kind of vibe. So Bill Withers and, Phil Collins and all that kind of stuff. And music, my dad's a great musician in so much as he just plays and he gigs and he just does it and he loves it and he just loves it all the time and he plays all the time. And to me, I kind of always come back to this word practice. I think a lot of people see practice as, certainly when they're kind of emerging as musicians, practice is this stick that you get whacked with. You're not doing your practice. Wow. Yeah. And practice is just what you do when you do it. So you can't not do your practice because your practice is just what you do. Yeah. Whether you play the piano once a week or never, or look at it or throw balls at it, doesn't matter. That's your practice. So you can't not do your practice. Your practice is just to be. It's a very Zen concept to me now. And I've always had that. So in music, it's been very liberating and I've released music very easily and always have, and found that very freeing. And now I'm thinking about writing a book. I get it. I get the forces of nature against you, the evil tentacles in the mind. But what's it going to be? Oh, but there's 10 books. Oh, well, I don't know which one's the best one. Oh, and that's come from my bad, my educational chip on my shoulder. I'm not good enough. I'm dyslexic as well. I'm going to reveal to the world what a moron I am once and for all. And it's going to be in stone. Yeah. And, and the fear is huge. But I know I've got a book. I know I've got several books. But can I, for the life of me, get the damn thing written and get it out? No, but I'm going to change that. And I'm going to change it to exactly what you're saying. The first book is not going to be the best book I've ever written or read. It's not going to be the definitive book, but I need to just do 1 hour a day writing the book and repeat until the book eventually gets done and then released, and then I can move on. Because if it's that important to me, which it is, I need to stop the barriers and take some of my musical practice, which is I see now making music as almost live Polaroids. So I made an album with an artist, Catherine Greenwood, in lockdown. Because it just felt like I wanted to take this picture. Is the album perfect? Hell no. Yeah. Would it be different if I did it now? Yes. But it wouldn't be the same Polaroid. And I'm really proud of that record. Will stand as my experience in that time. Absolutely. There's even like bits where we're trying to record vocals. My wife is a singer. And we've got like the baby monitor on. So there's like Artie, kind of wailing in the background. Not wailing. That makes it sound really bad. It sounds like we were ignoring him while we were recording. We were doing his noises.
Yeah.
Whatever, I don't know, babies over monitor noises. And I'm really proud of all that. And the kids were in the studio a lot, and it was all done early morning.
Yeah.
So it is what it is. And I totally agree with you and love, we've got a kind of mutual appreciation, I think, for Stephen Pressfield's The War of Art and Austin Kleon's books. And I always show that slide to emerging musicians of, my recording has been automatically stopped. There we go. Restart. The camera only does 30-minute chunks.
Oh, yeah, okay.
So I always show that slide from Austin Kleon of don't wait until you know who you are to begin your work. And I think that's so important because, like you said, the doing is the finding out. Yeah,
it is. It is. I mean, like coming back to your writing, the thing that I can kind of relate to, I've never written a book, but I've written a PhD, and my first chapter, I came back to it at the end of my PhD. So the PhD took me 5 years, and in the kind of end of the fourth year, I came back to my first chapter, totally rewrote it. Because I was like, this isn't important, and this isn't written very well, and but I'd have never got to that point where I could look back and say this isn't right if I hadn't written the first chapter.
Yeah.
And you just have to start. You really do. And when I look, even my first journal article that was published, I've got five journal articles that I published over that time as well. And when I look back at that first one, I'm like, it's not terrible, and people do even cite it. Like I get noted when it gets cited, and I'm a little bit kind of like, oh no, not that one. I've got better ones. I've got better journal articles, and even things that have been published. My first one wasn't my best one. No way. Yeah. But I knew I just had to get started, and it's the same with releasing, and it's the same with me launching the course that I'm launching. That's a really good example of where I didn't know who I was in terms of providing some kind of resource for women in music. I didn't know at the beginning. And so I started with a Facebook group, which is called the Female DIY Musician Tribe.
That reminded me yesterday of, did you see, sorry to cut you off, but did you see the Donald Trump interview?
I didn't.
Someone who was talking about Donald Trump said, yes, I'm the delegate forever in America, and I'm voting for Donald John President. Live on television.
Oh dear.
So yeah, you launched your Facebook group.
Yes, I launched my Facebook group called Facebook. Yeah, I launched Facebook. Yeah. They just cut me out, Matt. So I launched my Facebook group, but it was very kind of
called Donald John President.
Called Donald John Facebook.
Yeah,
it's so easy coming up with names.
Yeah. So what was your Facebook
anyway,
group?
The point is the point that I'm making, I guess, is that at the beginning that was so open. It was so just like I'm just providing lots of tips for women who want to get the music out. And then the more I kept doing it, I kept going live every week. I got to know people a bit better. I then was like, right, I want to make a course. I want to actually teach women how to release music. And then I did loads of interviews with women who very generously gave me their time. And the more I kept doing this stuff and showing up and talking to people, the more I realised, oh crap, actually the reason why there's not as many women releasing music is because not as many women have recordings. And the reason not as many women have recordings is because not as many women feel comfortable recording themselves and going into studios. So then I was like...
This is such a big problem and something that I'm incredibly committed to. Why do you think that is?
Well, that's a big question. But I mean, I think your experience that you shared of you being in the choir and somebody saying, oh, Matt, you're out of tune. That's not good. It doesn't sound good. And then you being like, oh, crap. Well, maybe I need to look outside of myself to make music. I think that a lot of the time women have the opposite experience. And I think also, when I think about my experience growing up, now I grew up in, I was really kind of consciously growing up in the 90s, let's say. I was born in the 80s, but I was growing up in the 90s. And what could I see in music? I could see mainly women was front singers. Sometimes they wrote the music, but not all the time at all, not very often really. Especially people who are in the mainstream anyway. Even women who are experimental, like PJ Harvey, Bjork, etc., were very much kind of beautiful, strange singers. They were all very photogenic, very thin. None of them were ever on instruments, apart from PJ Harvey was on a guitar, but none of them were really kind of, especially on electronic instruments. And there were really no female producers that I knew at all. And when I was at school, I never had anyone ask me, do you want to come back and try out this new synth that I've got, or this new even 4-track tape recorder? Girls weren't doing that. So even me playing an instrument, even me playing guitar was really unusual. Like me actually getting guitar lessons was really unusual as a girl. So there's that as well. And then I think also just the fact that there's a narrative, well, also when you step in a room. So I tried to do the music technology A-level, but it had been totally oversubscribed and it was all dudes. So I couldn't do it. And then whenever I did music technology modules in my undergrad, it was almost all guys, and it was me and maybe one other woman. Did my MA in Sonic Arts, it was me and one other girl out of 17 people. Then I did my PhD and it was me, one of 5 women out of 30 people. So you're just always, at the moment, you're still always in the minority. But I think even growing up, you just don't get primed, I think, in the same way.
But the problem is systemic, isn't it? Because the women are there. So, you've got Sister Rosetta Thorpe, is it? I've forgotten her surname.
So, yeah.
Who played incredible Gibson SG blues guitar, totally rocking. And then there's all the electronic pioneers, Susan Ciani, Delia Derbyshire, Wendy Carlos, Laurie Spiegel. And they just have been buried.
Yeah.
I mean, that's emerging now, this...
Yeah. It's been great. It's like a kind of, what would you call it? Like a excavation almost of, a history of women in electronic music, which is great. And I think that for me, like, I always used to listen to music and I'd listen to the whole of it. So I'd listen, I really picked out the melodies and the lyrics, obviously. And the first thing I started doing was singing and then playing guitar and then writing songs. But what I also was fascinated by was how people got certain sounds and how certain textures layered up and what those sounds made me feel. And I think the other thing, and this is where my method of teaching women production and recording is really different, because I really focus on how you want your music to feel, not just what a certain button does in practical terms. So I start with, how do you want your music to emotionally feel? How does it need to feel? And then how do we do that? And I think that whenever I learnt about technology, that was just stripped right out of it. And you'd only get that through your own self-reflection, or if you were lucky enough to have some really cool friends who would talk about that stuff with you.
Which is fascinating, because if you watch not any, but if you watch a lot of interviews with successful producers, I was watching No ID talking on the Ableton Loop conference when I went there, and he was talking very much like production is a story, and you're telling this story through sound. Yeah. And that's so different from the hard knee, soft knee on the compression ratio means that the curve goes exponential rather than linear. And that's such a different approach. And my experience has been, I interviewed Alex Metric, not for this podcast, for a series of Westminster Conversations. And quite often when I read interviews with a lot of successful practitioners, they are not... I mean, this is not exclusive, but they're not always as technologically savvy as you would expect them to be. They are incredible creative practitioners, but in my experience, there's not a line that says the more technical knowledge you have, the more your music communicates to your audience.
No, absolutely not.
In fact, I'd say it's probably like...
Yeah, I think you're right. I think that people really get hung up, and again, I think there's a kind of it's a machismo, which is damaging to both women and men, and any gender you ascribe to. But it's damaging to everyone, because I know guys that feel really crippled by it, especially in learning environments where they just don't feel like they can ask questions, because it will make them look like they don't understand every single detail of every single thing they're doing technically.
I think this is something I've been meaning to bring up through this whole conversation, because what I'm interested in with this podcast is creativity as a force, and the system, the world that we exist as creatives within. And I think this is such a cultural phenomenon, and it goes back to Ken Robinson talking about creativity in education, and a statement that I learned from my MA in education that resonated with me so much, and that is, it's quite a tongue twister, so I'm going to have to take two to get it right, but you need to be careful not to make the measurable important, but to make the important measurable.
Yeah.
And that is so true in education. And I'm so, the more I kind of look at the big picture, the more I see metrics, statistics, and data dominating our kind of drive in this neoliberal agenda.
Yeah.
And that in turn pushes a way much harder to measure and assess things, creativity being the biggest nightmare for any measurement metric, and upscales measurable things, compression ratios, anything that is quite black and white gets foregrounded, whereas the really important things get rear-grounded, if that's a word. And this morning I was reading, The Guardian, as of course I would be, being the ultimate stereotype.
Yeah.
But it was talking about, again, it's a metric, but it was talking about a measurement of kids' sense of well-being taken at 15. And unsurprisingly, in England, we have the lowest metric out of Poland, Finland.
Yeah.
Our kids are on 67%. And I'm just thinking, what is the damage that this intense neoliberal push, this capitalist agenda of the country, constant economic growth, the damage that that's having to you, to me, to our kids, and it just seems to be it just seems to be getting worse and worse.
Yeah, and I think that so coming back to like the whole premise of this podcast, where it's something I have had to struggle with, I guess, if you can say struggle. I don't know. It's not the worst fate in the world, but it's something that I have struggled with the whole of my life, is how can I, being me, and I'm just so set up to kind of, I don't know what it is. I don't mean creative in a kind of scatty way, or I'm not scatty at all. I'm really, I don't know. I find it really hard to fit into a mold. I find it really hard to fit into an institution. I find it really hard to just be given a system and told, right, just carry that out. I love making things. I've always loved making things to an unusual degree from what I can see from my friends growing up. So, in the summers when I was 13, I would build whole model villages just because I loved making things, I
can picture the 13-year-old you.
Yeah. I would just be, I'd just be, in my room, just spending the whole day building these model villages, like building a hill and a stream, and because I just wanted to make things. I loved Lego. And then with building the business and building the course, that's been another way of creatively building something.
Yeah.
And I find it really hard to not do that. But I often find it very frustrating to kind of, I guess, fit into somebody else's model, especially.
And you built your artist career, and I've kind of used that as a bit of a lead to talk about the recent comments from Daniel, I never know if it's Ek or EK, talking about musicians just needing to work harder to fit into the new way of Spotify's payments. Now, you're someone that's really succeeded on that platform. Do you agree with those comments? How do you feel about Spotify and being a creative person and the payment infrastructure?
They should pay more. There's just absolutely no dispute on that. They should pay more, because it's not fair at the moment. what you get for all the work that you put in and what they recoup. It's not fair. It's wildly out of balance. So there's no doubt that they should be paying more royalties to musicians. I also think there should be... It's all very well and good saying you should work harder in order to make this system, this algorithm work for you. But that's not enough if you don't give people the resources to do that, give people the strategies and the process to do that. You're just expected to kind of scramble around and hope that makes sense. And for me, I benefited from it without doing anything in terms of having a Spotify strategy. I barely really valued Spotify in any way before I started seeing I was getting plays on my tracks because it was so in its infancy. I really just never thought about it, and I just stuck my tracks up, and I thought, well, I'm just going to release tracks because I don't want to go to my deathbed not doing it. So I just ticked, okay, I'll release on Spotify, Deezer, blah, blah, blah. So by the time I started recouping those royalties, I really hadn't made much of an effort to do that. So I absolutely have no kind of advice on anyone wanting to get into it. But what I would say is...
We have talked at length about your commitment to you as an artist and the amount of work you put into that. So we could say that the Spotify plays correlated to your drive as an artist.
No doubt. Yeah, no, I mean, I think the reason that happened was partly luck and partly that I worked my butt off, but I worked consistently. So that was years of work gone into that. That is not just I released something and a couple of years later. This is years and years of that. And then also the music I make's good. Like I know that might sound a bit kind of cheeky, but it's true. It's not shit music. So all of those things have to be in place. I fully believe that. I fully believe if you keep showing up consistently and you're in it for the long haul, you will see results. They just won't be what you predict. So for me, I thought that would be that I would get, lots. I was hoping I would get a record deal, I'd get radio play, I'd get a tour of the world, etc., etc. What happened was I got Spotify royalties.
Yeah, it was funny for me. I got the opposite. I didn't get Spotify royalties, but I got signed to Sony, toured the world, played thousands of banging shows, and I got a lot of ad and video game syncs for my music.
Yes, yeah. So I think you've got to go into these things with an open mind, that you may have an agenda of what you want it to do for you, but you've got to be open that it's probably not going to look like that. You will reap rewards, but you can't predict them right now. And part of that is also because the technology just hasn't been invented yet. So for me, when I first started releasing music, Spotify didn't exist, or I think it had existed for like a year, literally a year. So I had no idea that was going to be my big success in my music career. No idea. So I think that's really important. But I think on a general level, the way that things have changed for musicians, I would say if I was starting out now, because I'm not releasing music now, I'm really focusing on supporting other women to get into music and teaching. That's my main focus right now. But if I was going to be, really focusing on that, I'd be focusing on building my own online community. I'd be focusing on really learning about how to market myself and how to record myself, and just really kind of have that control and that knowledge of those processes. But I'd also really work on not binding my whole identity and self-worth in the success of that too. Which is the really tough bit. Yeah.
Yeah, I did that. And
I did that too.
It didn't end well for me, to be honest. I felt very fortunate that I kind of navigated my way out of it. But it can lead you in quite a dark place. And the weirdest thing I found was no matter how high up the step ladder of success you go, it's never ending. There's always another level. And at the top you've got the Beatles, and they'll never be toppled as popular music's most successful and important band. Yeah. You can't beat them.
No.
That's kind of, that crown is taken. And I think this is very difficult to get your head round. But what isn't taken is all of the new emerging opportunities, the online performance spaces, the virtual reality stuff, all of the new opportunities that progress has brought to us. There's a lot to play for there. And in a lot of respects, there's never been a better time to be a creative person. This podcast is really dedicated to the title. Well, the theme was creativity as a force for global change. It's very interesting that you really, the reason I invited you on because I think you really embody that. You're focusing all of your energy on creative change. How do you think what can we do you think, as creatives to continue this change in what feels like politically the most bonkers time I've ever experienced? I mean, if Trump gets in again, what the hell? Yeah.
Which I'm fully expecting he will.
Yeah, and the weirdest thing is it probably will, and I'm thinking, this is more likely than unlikely. So what do you think we can do to change things with our creative practice? It's a big question.
It's a big question. I think the most important thing right now is creating some kind of intimacy and connection with each other. Really, that's the most important thing that we can do, and I think probably the most nourishing thing that we can do for ourselves and each other. So for example, what I'm doing with my course, it's not just a course that's flung up on Udemy and you just download it for 10 quid and that's it and you forget about it. My course is like a fully live online learning experience with a community, and it's a whole space of its own. And I think I knew that what I was going to create had to be something that had that heart to it and had that real warmth to it, because that's something we lack right now in some ways, and more ways than one. COVID has obviously driven us further apart, quite literally, and then technology has created these very strange digital spaces. So I knew that what women need anyway is to have more connections with each other, to kind of show that they're not alone, and that these insecurities or these talents or these gifts that they have are shared and are worth respecting and attending to, for example. But I knew that you really can only appreciate that if you have a sense of community and you have a sense of connection. So I think as creatives, that's something that we need to, if we want to make change, I think that's something that we have to do. But I think we also really have to search inside of ourselves, and I think it would be great. This is so utopian and I really haven't thought it through, but it'd be great if...
like all great utopian statements.
Yeah. But I would love it if musicians and creatives were able to look inside and really ask what is motivating me here. Because for many, many, many of us, it's fear. And I think that a lot of the time when we want to put something out into the world, a lot of the time it's fear that motivates us. It's fear of not being good enough. It's fear that we're going to live a life of disappointment and boredom. It's all those fears. And I really, really recommend, and I'm still working on this, but coming from a place of joy, which I know sounds so Jesus Christ, Isobel, but coming from that place of do I care about this? Does it light me up? Does it nourish me? Do I really think it's important? Is it saying something that needs to be said? Whatever it is, coming from that place rather than, oh God, I hate my job. I hate my life. I've got to do this quickly. I've got to get this out. Oh my God, I don't feel good enough. I need everyone to love my music, or whatever it is they're doing. And to be really clear on that. And a lot of the time it'll be confusing because it'll be a whole bunch of stuff together. But I think that's really important, because those systems of having some kind of career have disintegrated in the traditional sense.
Yeah,
so there
totally
are not... they've disintegrated. There's not people anymore, even in publishing and, other creative industries, there's not people anymore handing you that check and saying, you have 3 years, write the album or write the book or whatever. Now it's about you scrambling at the new platforms that are opening up and making that future yourself. So you have to really tap in with yourself and say, why am I doing this? Because if you're doing it for the wrong reasons, i.e. fear, you're gonna burn out, and you're gonna look back and you will realize you did things in ways that were not supportive and haven't got you where you wanted to go anyway. So I think that's more important than ever, because there isn't anyone no one's coming to save you now. No one's, which I know sounds really scary, but
it's true though, isn't it?
No one's coming. Yeah, nobody's coming.
Don't throw yourself off the boat, because no one's going to jump in after you. I think a lot of talent shows give the impression that there's a whole team of people scouting the world just for you.
Yeah.
But the sad reality of that is, yes, they are. And if they find you, they're going to take all control and all income.
Yeah.
And they're going to use you for as long as you sell.
Yeah.
As long as you're interesting. And then as soon as that has happened, they will throw you away.
Absolutely.
And the saddest thing about that is people seem okay with building up their whole life experience. So years and years of singing and stories and relationships, for it to be a small window of time where all those experiences are exploited to someone else's commercial gain. And then once that's gone, it's like that idea of you can't step into the same river twice. Once you've exposed yourself in that way, no one will ever see you the same way again.
Yeah,
and
absolutely.
it may be a positive experience, and I'm not saying it's always going to be negative. Some people may have gone through that route and succeeded and got where they want to be. But I really question, is that transaction worth it? Your whole life for that? I personally have never felt comfortable with that, and I don't think that is worth it.
No, I agree. And I think that's a reason why my career has been the way it is. I've often ran to the hills when I've even had a sniff of that, which has definitely made my career harder, in terms of like just getting a quick win of, oh, somebody thinks I'm good at this. Oh, this is done really well. Great. I didn't really have that. So I understand the attraction. And for some people, actually that is quite a good fit, because they don't want to put in the hard graft of building something themselves. They just want to get up on stage and sing, or they just want to whatever it is. So it's not to say, like, it really is, if you are genuinely creative, because that to me isn't like genuinely creative. To me, that's that you have a skill and you can replicate it time and time again, and you enjoy doing that. Great. Creativity is where you are able to actually use your imagination and then realize a vision and put that into some kind of meaningful output in the world. That's creativity. So you could be creative but be, head of a paper company in Slough, like The Office or something. But you could be a really creative person because of the way you run that factory or something. You could be really uncreative but have a fucking brilliant singing voice and sing on the X Factor. So, creativity is I guess I'm speaking to those people who really embody that's like proper creative muscle there, and just have that real need, like the 13-year-old Isobel, to just make stuff and build stuff and have an idea in your head and just make it happen. So I think that when you're doing that, you really have to, it's a daily mindset struggle. Like on the daily, you have to be talking to yourself about what the narratives are you're telling yourself, like you in your book, whether you're procrastinating, whether you're getting in your own way, why you think something's going to happen or not happen, and why you're doing it. The most important thing is, why are you doing this? And I also kind of think that, especially when I talk to younger musicians, I say to them, now more than ever, you have to be interested in who's listening to your music. You really, really do. A lot of the time people are focused on how many followers they've got, all that kind of stuff. But you have to be focused on who's interested in your music, who's listening to your music. You have to want to get to know them, and you have to have conversations with them, and you have to understand them inside out. That's really important now.
Social media metrics measure width, they measure the amount of, but they never measure depth. They don't measure how much that one person loved it so much. They don't measure that.
No, because, you can have 10,000 Facebook followers and none of them are going to buy you a new single because they're not engaged and they don't care. But if you're speaking to people because you know who they are, and you really have that ability to cut through that screen because you can see them and you know what they're feeling and thinking, then you can start sharing your music. And then it gets more exciting sharing your music, because then you can start sharing your music for them. And then it's not just, I've got a new single out, buy my single. It's you realise that the people who are probably interested in your music may have also gone through postnatal depression, let's say. So then you can start saying, I wrote this song 2 weeks after my son was born. I was going through this, this and this. If you've ever suffered with this, I think you'll love it. It really, helped me move on, blah, blah, blah. That's so much more interesting to connect with someone like that. And it's so much more interesting if you're on the receiving end of it. So I know I've kind of diverged a bit into social media marketing here, but...
Well, it's a big issue, but it's interesting.
But I think it relates to, why are you doing this? Are you doing this just to get that affirmation that, I'm okay. Lots of people like my music, I'm okay. Lots of people like my Facebook page, I'm okay. I've made some money out of my music, I'm okay. But actually, that's just all about fear. And why are you doing it? Are you doing it to actually communicate something and express something that needs to be shared? Are you doing it because it's important for you, because it's releasing something or whatever it is, and therefore somebody else might have that experience listening to it? So now more than ever, from a personal point of view, from a wider success point of view, from a global point of view, we have to become actually genuinely interested in each other and genuinely self-reflective of ourselves.
Yeah, I think it's fascinating, isn't it? I got a couple of points to say relating to what you said. That firstly, the music industry used to measure the singles chart, and then that depth was measured with the album chart. So if someone went and bought the album, that was like, they're really committed.
Yeah.
And now I see that translated from amount of followers. And even though a lot of people I speak to who are in the music industry kind of frontline business, they say those numbers are important. What they're more interested in is the connectivity, the communication, the engagement metrics with how much are these people engaging with this person rather than how many followers do they have. The second point I thought was interesting was, going back to your fear and getting things done. I found that Stephen Pressfield's book, The War of Art, great for that, and giving a name to it, The Resistance. Yeah. And that has just helped me so much. And I'm just reading Seth Godin's book, Linchpin, and he adopts Stephen Pressfield's The Resistance. And he gives a whole list of fabulous reasons why you don't do things related to the resistance. Yeah. And he talks about the lizard brain in this book, The Linchpin. And he says that the lizard brain is the oldest part of our brain, and the part of our brain that's about communication and creativity is the newest part of our brain. So when our fear response gets triggered, so we're in imminent danger, the lizard brain kicks in and it saves us. Which is great. You need that if there's a tiger running at you. You don't really want to be thinking about your book at that moment in time. Yeah. So it's hardwired into us to override thoughts about your podcast for, oh my God, there's a tiger, fight or run. Yeah. So it's great. But in a lot of modern situations, apparently this part of our brain gets triggered unnecessarily. And it paralyzes our creativity. And I love this idea of the resistance and found it fascinating. So anyone who's listened to this, definitely check out Stephen Pressfield's The War of Art and Seth Godin's Linchpin as a real way of educating yourself to be more creative. Yeah. So it's been great, Isobel. I think we should wrap. It's been a wonderful conversation. I could talk to you all day and have done many times.
I know, that's right. So, we literally have done that.
So I'm going to put some links to your community of makers.
Great, thank you.
I would love to link to your book, but you've not written it yet. I'd love to link to my book, but I've not written it yet. So I think you should make yours a book, because I think I'd love to put that on the reading list of the people I teach and work with. I think that would be a real asset. So maybe hopefully that can drive you when you're thinking.
One day. I would love to write a book for sure. And I love writing.
Turn the course into a book. Turn the course into a book.
Or turn the course into a book. Yeah, we'll see.
It could, because I think we need a new version of The Artist's Way. I love The Artist's Way. I think it's a great book. Yeah. But sometimes some people I give it to, they get a little bit done in with some of the...
Oh, God. All the God stuff. I know.
I didn't want to say it, but they get a bit done in with the God stuff.
Yeah, I know. So I find that hard as well. And I think, I think that... No, I'd love to write a book about... one book that I'd love to write is about... something to do with walking and listening and creativity. I'm not sure.
Yeah.
But we'll see. Yeah.
I like walking, listening, creativity. But it's been great to have you. Thank you so much for taking the time out to have this chat.
No, thanks for having me.
Really enjoyed it. It's been great fun. And it's cheered me up no end because I was in a bit of a dark spot. I was in a bit of a dark spot at 8:29 this morning before I logged on.
No, that was, like I said, that was me last week. And I think it's so easy to get there. And I think... this is why I know that I need to start taking all the workaholism seriously, because I know that when I get exhausted and I get overwhelmed and then it all starts feeling very, very dark. And I'm working on that. So I know how that feels.
It's a bank holiday weekend, and I've had myself saying in the past, but I don't work in a bank.
Yes. So are you taking... Yeah. I'm taking it off too. Yeah.
I think the real change that's happened in me taking more work in university has been, I'm now really looking forward to that bank holiday weekend, and I'm going to take it and I'm going to hang out with my kids and I'm going to party.
Great. Yeah.
And that's slightly diminished version of partying with a 2-year-old and a 6-year-old.
Yeah.
But I'm going to party and I'm going to enjoy the weekend.
That's great. No, I'm the same. I hope you do too. No, I'm the same. I was like, I was not going to take it off. And then after these 4 days away from work, I was like, no, I'm definitely taking off. Doesn't matter how much work I've got to do. Fuck it. I deserve to have time off as well. I need time off to do my work well. Yeah, totally. Yeah. Well, Isobel, thank you so much. Have a great day. No problem. You too. Thanks for being on Playing the System, and I'll see you soon. My pleasure. I'll see you soon, Matt. Great. Bye. Okay. Bye. So yes, that wraps up episode 2 of Playing the System, the podcast featuring the wonderful, human, caring and friend, Dr. Isobel Anderson. I feel so lucky to know Isobel. I think she's a real asset to me in my life and will be to you in your life. So if you want to reach out, Isobel runs the Female DIY Musician, which is all about getting people to recording. I think that is such an important time to engage creatively. This week, as I'm recording this outro, we saw the return to university life, where I work as a senior lecturer and course leader at the University of Westminster. Isobel works at the ICMP in London. And I felt deep levels of anxiety in going back to normality. In fact, it's not normal at all. It's kind of crazy. And in fact, I felt so anxious, I made myself ill and couldn't go in for my first day, which is ridiculous. And I feel if I'm experiencing anxiety and I don't feel socially anxious as a person, other people out there must be really suffering. So if you are, reach out, connect and make. A good friend of mine and wonderful human being, Eddie Temple Morris, is a Patreon for My Black Dog. And also there's the Calm Society, which is the campaign against living miserably. So if you are struggling out there, reach out or make things, get in touch with your community, get in touch with me, get in touch with Isobel, and make stuff. Thank you for being part of the Playing the System community. It means so much to me to have you here. Stay tuned. New episode coming soon. Lots of love as always. See ya.